So there it is, all nicely covered in propolis. And what I'm going to do now is, actually this is not the full assembly, of course, this is just the trough. Now some top bar hive people simply use just the trough, but I'm not just building a hive here, I'm building a temple, and so I have some feelings about that, I guess. What I'd like to offer first, of course, is a floor. I'm trying to make a hive that might be available for all weather systems. So some places you can actually just put a mesh underneath or something, but I like to do a floor. Now, we're talking biodynamics here. In terms of wood, we need to be thoughtful about what kind of wood we'd like to use. I've pre-prepared the floor. This is a piece of 3/4 inch birch ply. Now why birch? Birch is the wood, the tree that corresponds to Venus. And our bees have a deep relationship with Venus, which is too much for me to go into here. But birch also has that relationship with Venus. Now we also know that birch is not a very good waterproof outdoor kind of wood. It tends to rot. So I've heavily varnished this. Now the metal that corresponds with Venus and birch is copper. So I've edged this in the copper that we use in the gardens for snails. Snails can't cross over this because their sliminess makes sort of electricity there, and it gives them a little bit of a shock, so they won't walk over the copper, which is why we use it in the garden. But here we're using it just because it's copper, and we're also edging the plywood because the glue of the plywood is at the edges, and we don't want bees getting affected by that. So we have a double win here. We get to cover the edge, protecting the ply from peeling, protecting bee from the glue that is the layering of the plywood, and bringing in the influence of copper, which brings in the influence of Venus, and we already have her wood, which is birch. These are the biodynamic correspondences that apply to our bees. And as a matter of interest, Venus's day is Friday, Freya's day. And Freya is the Celtic goddess that relates also to Venus, one of the dynamic feminine principles such as our bee. So I offer a birch ply floor. This is 3/4 inch. You could get 1/2 inch if you're in a warm enough climate. Generally speaking, 3/4 is good for everybody. And then we give it a nice, what I call this is the dance floor. So here we get to the situation where what you're actually looking at is the hive on a floor, kind of set back a little bit. So this edge parallels the back edge of the floor. Everything sits nice and tight, no wobbly wobblies. Everything sits nice and tight, straight on here, which means the bottom of the floor is even, which is one of my challenges, but we get there. A good carpenter won't have a problem with that. This is also within the floor. Then what we're going to do is we're going to put a lid on, of course. And we'll get to the bars in a minute. I want to show you how this thinking about wood matters. Most of our beehives are made of pine. Pine is easily available. It can be treated to be outside for a long time. Pine relates, however, to Saturn. It's an evergreen, and it relates to the planet Saturn. Now we've just said that birch relates to the planet Venus. Saturn and Venus are not normally in a very friendly relationship. And what you want to consider there is what would mitigate that sort of less than friendly relationship. If you think about that from a stellar point of view, what you would want to bring in between Venus and Saturn would be Jupiter. And Jupiter happens to be represented in a tree people's world by the wonderful maple. And so, fortunately, I found a nice little 1/4-inch ply maple that I could cut to fit right over the top here. I'm only doing this so that there is simpatico and integrity throughout in this biodynamic way, so that the pine, the birch, and now the maple all harmonize. And then on top of this, what we're going to do is put what I call the weather roof. And you might just want to put a spacer, of course, between the two roofs so that they don't get dampness there. And what I'm going to do is pick up this very big weather roof right here and pop it on top so you can see the whole thing. I hope you can see the whole thing. This is the point of this hive, one of them. This overlaps, overlaps, overlaps. And what we're doing here is we're making sure that the rain doesn't come into the entrance, actually that the sun doesn't pour into the hive too hot. You've got insulation because you've got airspace between the two roofs, and you'll be able to help your bees maintain a very nice constant temperature here. Then you'll put this whole hive also on little rails, perhaps, some kind of small risers, so there's airspace underneath it on whatever table or whatever you put it on. And then that will also allow insulation for winter especially, but you've got airflow underneath the floor, airflow between these two roofs, a nice big space overlapping here. The entrance rarely will get rain. This is very, very nice for them. You can arrange this as you wish. This is purely personal. I like to keep enough space out here so that there's room for me to put a Boardman feeder with a nice jar of food here, and they can come in and out of this little hole that I've made here to come and feed here if they wish to, or I could just stop it up with a nice cork that I've cut down, and if they don't need that hole, I can block it. So the dance floor, the entrance, the windows, the east window, this faces south, the maple, the birch roof, the copper. All of these things are considerations for our bees in a biodynamic way. And that word consideration, it actually means to consider, to take into account the sidereal issues, the stars and planets, and to bring all of that energy into the right relationship here. After this, I'm going to open up the hive and show you the bars that we use inside and how to actually put your bees in it and take care of them